Are you there?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
you're there? Okay.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I should say.
Yes.
I'm Allison, and I'm a licensed professional counselor.
Yes, and I'm Kelly. I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
And if you're just joining us for the first time, this is Coffee with Kelly and Allison, and we just throw around and process some of the things that we've been experiencing and noticing in our practice that we think might be helpful to you. So today we're discussing something. I have a concern that I'd like to bring up to us all. I have noticed, this is harmless in a lot of ways, but I've noticed, especially on social media, a lot of normalizing around what this pandemic is creating in people's lives, which is completely understandable. In a lot of ways, it is normal, but the normalizing of not being able to do anything all day, eating and drinking all day, lots of things that in no way do I want to shame or say like that's wrong, because it makes sense. But my concern, I want to push back a little bit on this, is that are we normalizing depression? Are we going to come out as a people group that have experienced a traumatic, global, worldwide pandemic, and we're going to have a people group that have some serious depression, and we've just been saying, well, yeah, it's normal, like we'll pop out of it, we're fine? And for people that are suffering and really experiencing severe symptoms, I don't want people to think that's normal.
Oh, Allison, I think, bringing that up it's an important topic, because I think normalization can be a coping mechanism in terms of just kind of taking the fear out of what we're experiencing. But I do think there is, and I know I'm seeing in my office a lot, just quite a bit of situational depression. It's not necessarily this pervasive long-term depression, but I think right now we'd be remiss to not acknowledge we have all of these factors and contributing pieces that make situational depression a great possibility. I mean, I think the stress that we're experiencing, the lack of structure and routine, the isolation, all of that is a perfect recipe for people experiencing depression.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. And so let's unpack a little bit of what situational depression is and what it isn't. And situational depression is a type of an adjustment disorder. So it's a reaction to a traumatic event. And trauma is all in the eye of the beholder. It's your perspective of what you are experiencing. So it may not be COVID. It could be the loss of job. It could be the isolation. It could be anything you've experienced during this time that you are feeling is traumatic, and you may not name it that. But situational depression is a reaction to a traumatic event. And that looks like hopelessness. It looks like feeling like you're a failure or letting people down. We talked about mom guilt a few weeks ago. Like, man, I'm just sucking up being a mom so bad right now. Every day I'm disappointing people. It can look like lethargy, or it can look, there's anxiety, irritability, lack of sleep, lower appetite or increase of appetite. And a big one is loss of pleasure and enjoyment. That is like a big red flag. If you are having a hard time enjoying things, then I'd say that that's something to really consider.
Yeah, I know a coworker, I loved what she did, but she had 2 pictures in her office to describe what depression feels like. And one was a picture of a garden with lots of color, lots of vibrancy, lots of dynamic. And the other picture was the same scenery, but it was black and white. And I think that's good imagery for people, to kind of determine whether or not am I experiencing depression. I think it's almost like living in a black and white world. You're engaging with the same scenery, but there's kind of a dullness. There's a lack of dynamic. There's a lack of vibrancy. There's a lack of ability to kind of see the hope and the color in things. So that it's a very unclinical way to approach depression, but I think a good picture for people to kind of capture, am I feeling more dull? Am I feeling, like the world doesn't have the same vibrancy right now?
Yes. Oh, I love that illustration. I think that's a great way. I think it's really relatable. And it's, depression really is like a picture living in a world without color.
Yeah.
I love that imagery. And it's like a cloud over your head, a thundercloud that just, no matter where you go. And a lot of us are great at putting like a mask on over that to disguise what it looks like. And so you may be doing a good job at disguising it. But if you are really struggling, I just want to encourage you, like, keep trying, Don't like stop trying, but don't go without the support. And so something we also wanted to make a distinction with is a few weeks ago, we talked about grief.
Mm.
And grief and depression have a lot of similarities. Oh, do they? But I think there's an important distinction we need to make between grief and depression. Do you have some insight that you'd like to share, Kelly, about what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I think sometimes grief can turn into situational depression. Definitely
Yes,
the
good
justice
point.
within grief. But I think, in many ways, I think the tendency in the field, is to pathologize grief. When we know, grieving does take on a form of that can feel like persistent sadness and irritability and all those things. But I think what you oftentimes find with depression is that there's more of a steadiness in terms of that sadness. There's more of a low energy, a low mood that kind of pervades the days and the weeks. With grief, you more feel the undulation, right? You feel kind of the shifting and the changing of those moods more rapidly. Whereas with depression, there's more of a steadiness to the sadness.
Yes. Okay. So with grief, what you're saying, you could probably still find some color in your world from time to time.
Ooh, I
It's
like
not all dull. It's not all
that.
black and white or gray and kind of blah. There you can find some moments of joy.
Yeah. And I think, oh, what were you going to say?
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No. I just think, even in terms of those neurotransmitters, I think with depression, I mean, you're looking at, one of the biggest neurotransmitters that's in charge of mood stabilization is serotonin, right? Like, and right now we have a real pullback in terms of those serotonin activating activities. Like we're not connected. We're not having the routine and structure that naturally keep those serotonin levels up. So I think it's important to note, even neurologically, like we're dealing with a decrease in serotonin across the board. So that requires more creativity in terms of how we're activating that serotonin. And I know you mentioned oxytocin too, which is
Mm-hmm.
another neurotransmitter.
Yeah, it's a hormone that acts as a neurotransmitter called the love or cuddle hormone. It's like a love drug. So when you get to socially connect with people in rich, meaningful ways, being around people you love, getting a hug, even cuddling with your dog or your pet can release this feel-good chemical. Oh, that feels so good. I feel so connected. I feel loved. Oxytocin and what you're saying, serotonin, we can boost and help reproduce serotonin in our brains by doing certain things that the pandemic has stripped away from us.
Totally. So Alison, what would you say in terms of people who might be feeling the situational depression? I mean, what would your recommendation be to people who are listening and saying, oh yeah, I actually might be dealing with some depressive symptoms?
I would first say that makes sense. Yes. And I don't want to normalize severe symptoms that are, if you in the last couple weeks have spent more days feeling colorless and lack of joy, then it's time to reach out to some friends, or please reach out to Kelly and I. We provide 20-minute free consultations to just hear what's going on. We can point you in a few directions. But as far as looking for, so counseling is the number one scientifically research-based, evidence-based approach to dealing with depression. So counseling. But if you need help today, like right now, all of the recommended treatments for depression are things like exercise, eating healthy, sleeping regular, consistent hours, like not oversleeping or undersleeping. It looks like maybe connecting with nature. Just go outside and put your feet in the grass and look at the color and just soak in it for a minute. But what is so hard about depression is that you don't feel like doing any of those things. And those things can feel absolutely out of reach and impossible to do. When someone says you need to eat regularly or eat healthily and exercise and you're like, well, of course I'd feel better if I did those things, but I feel like I can't. So what I would say is try something really, really just small, and it might be big for you. Start with something small. Maybe make a healthier choice, just one smaller, healthier choice. Swap out some for a better, healthier choice like fruit or vegetable. Maybe it's not going for a run. Maybe it's just taking a walk around the block real quick. Cuddle with your dog. Hug somebody. Hug yourself. I know that sounds so dumb, but hug yourself. Hug yourself. And yeah, please know that you're not alone, no matter how alone you feel. I know Westwoods has a huge support team of people that really, really care about making sure you're not alone. And this is a lonely time. So as scary as reaching out is, and that first step, maybe your goal is to shoot a text. And for those of you that have noticed people dropping off that you usually have good connection with, I'd say reach out. Think through people that maybe you haven't heard from in a while, or maybe they're not acting themselves online, or you're not getting those phone calls. Reach out and let them know you care. Oh, Alexa just told me to start my day.
I think that's a sign.
Alexa, stop. Okay, so you can get little reminders throughout your day to drink water and to get up and get going.
Alexa, yes. And Alison, I hear you saying too, just press in. Like I think, and that's been a theme throughout our coffee talks. Don't be afraid to press in. I know it's petrifying, and for a lot of people, it's scary to be able to have to admit, I'm not normal, I'm not myself right now. But I think one of the beautiful things about pressing in is the learning we're able to do about ourselves, about how we process what we need. So yeah, I would say don't be afraid to press in to these feelings and emotions, and really seek to understand more of what's going on for you.
Yeah, I love that. I know we're definitely out of time, but I can't end without saying, we're posting this for church, so I want to bring in spirituality. I want to bring in Jesus. That I love the children's song, Jesus Loves Me, like that when you are weak, he is strong. Like when you are at your worst and your weakest and you can't go on, like he is your refuge, he is your strength, and you're stronger than you know. And praying and reaching out to God and asking for help, and just knowing that he's always there. He's always reaching out for you. He wants you and he loves you just as you are. And he wouldn't love you anymore if you weren't struggling today. Like he meets you where you're at. And so I just want to encourage everyone watching with that today too.
Amen. Totally.
We'll see you in a couple weeks, guys.
Bye, guys.